everybody, how's it going? So today I wanted to walk you through my top 5 favorite books of all time. For this video I will include short stories and graphic novels because I have a few that have been super important to me or I just thoroughly enjoyed them. So why not? I'm the queen of this show. I want to preface this by saying that I was not a huge reader growing up. I had friends who always buried themselves in books, but really I was never like that. The turning point for me wasn't actually until my 3rd year of high school when I took an American literature class. To be honest, it helped that the teacher was incredible. Shout out to you, Mr. Vore, and your terrible last name. We got into things like Puritan literature, which I definitely was not, but I was kind of in my rebellious phase, so seeing how extreme religious traditions kind of affected the psyche was really satisfying for me as a 16-year-old. We also got into New England Gothic kind of literature. We read like Edgar Allan Poe. We got into transcendentalism, which is a quintessential part of American literature, and also it happens to be my favorite genre of philosophical literature. These are authors like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Washington Irving, Henry David Thoreau, and let me just say, civil disobedience slapped as an edgy teenager, especially following the 2016 presidential results. Doesn't help that Thoreau is a literal icon. Man's moved to the woods because he hated people so much. And fun fact about him, he didn't want to fund the Mexican-American War or slavery, which is what his taxes would have gone to at that point in time. So what he did, take notes, he just didn't pay him, and he went to jail for it. That's why I wanted to start this list off with a little piece of transcendentalism, Gothic, literature, nature, New England, spooky fest. Anyway, okay, so fear not. This is a collection of stories, and the one I am referencing is about 12 pages long, and that is called The Devil and Tom Walker, and it is by Washington Irving, and it was written in 1824. In the same book by the same author, you have stories like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, you have Rip Van Winkle, both of which are far more famous works of his, neither of which I have ever read in their entirety, ironically. But for now, we're sticking to The Devil and Tom. I read it every year on Halloween because I love it so much. So basically the story is about like this miserly man, Tom Walker, and his terrible wife, who is never given a name, but that's beside the point. They lived in the like untamed wilderness, which was then New England. It was still being developed really, but they didn't have much more than like a tiny shack in the middle of nowhere and a neglected donkey. And Irving makes a note to tell you that they're not taking care of their land is basically the moral of that little piece. But anyways, Tom goes into the woods one day, not because he wished to live deliberately, but instead he finds this like giant man. He's like hairy, hairier than any normal human being. And he's not black as in African American, he's black as in like coal. And this great big man, you can probably see where this is going, but he offers Tom wealth and fame in exchange for Tom's soul. So Tom plays it cool, even though he's already drooling over the prospect of wealth, tells the man he needs some time to think about it because he knows where this is going. So he goes home to tell his wife about the man, about the deal, whatever, and his wife berates him for not taking the deal, for not getting her out of this hellhole, and because she's so for him taking the deal out of spite, he's like, well, I think I'm not gonna do it. Hilarious. Anyways, a lot of other stuff happens. His wife goes into the woods to try to barter for herself. I won't tell you much more about it, but it is incredible and I adore it. I will say though as a forewarning, there are some terms that are thrown around in this little story that today are considered extremely racist and ignorant. But again, 200 years of history have passed since the publishing of this story and now. The last thing I have to say about this is that the description of both the natural and the supernatural is so beautiful and spooky. If you've ever read Dracula, maybe you felt that overwhelming sense of like dread that somehow Stoker weaves into like the narrative. Irving similarly casts a very spooky shadow, but with a twist of dark comedy, and it is go read it. Free PDFs online. I'll drop a link to it. So next we have Mouse. This graphic novel was very near and dear to me in my childhood. It's got kind of that Frankenstein setup in that it's a story within a story. So at the most superficial level, it's autobiographical, well, semi-autobiographical about the artist or the author of the book who is looking to get closer to his father and understand his history as well as his own familial roots. He learns about his mother who had committed suicide and basically the story of his parents living as Polish Jews in World War II. It is harrowing. It is at some points very hard to read just on the aspect of the content. Not a happy book, but it is so beautifully done and so worth reading. It discusses such an immensely heavy topic while delivering it in an interesting and accessible format in which like anyone could read. Again, I read this as a child and then I read it again for German class, and I got just as much enjoyment out of it. He does not shy away from the harder pills to swallow of this time in history, but he does it in such an artful way that just so adds to the plot. Revisiting it in my adulthood, it really reminded me where I come from, not only because I read it as a child, but because I am Jewish and we have lots of Central Eastern European roots. And it made me just fall in love with the novel all over again. I think children and adults everywhere should be reading this book. I get chills, it's so incredible. Another book that I think all children should read is Crime and Punishment, and I don't have a copy of it right now because I'm lending it to somebody else, but please enjoy this picture of it. This is an all-time classic novel. It's large, which scares a lot of people, but somehow Dostoyevski is so succinct, or maybe it's just, his translator. But whoever it is, I found the register of the language extremely easy to follow given that it was written in 1866. Normally books written before even like 1940, I have sometimes a hard time understanding the language. Like right now I'm reading a book called Vile Bodies by Evelyn Waugh. I don't know how to pronounce their name. It was written in the 20s. I have no idea what he's talking about at any given moment. Dostoyevsky, dead opposite, and it's absolutely harrowing. If you enjoy psychology, if you enjoy abnormal psychology, true crime, you will enjoy this. There is not a single dull moment in the entire book. Basically, it's about a poor college student who, in a momentary lapse of judgment, decides to, brutally murder his landlady with an axe. As one does. Mans didn't want to pay rent anymore. And don't worry, that happens in the first 50 pages, so I didn't spoil anything for you. We follow him as he evades police, his friends, his family, and descends basically into moral madness. It's about society and class and murder. You find yourself in the head of a man who had just committed this heinous crime, has to work through the self-justification of homicide, because the conviction of a court is nothing compared to the punishment of having to live with your own mistakes. And that is basically what the book is about. You should read it. On the complete other side of the spectrum, we have a short story called Erika, and that is by Elke, Heidenreich, and Sowa. And this little book is about 60 pages long, and it is adorable. It came to me just a few months ago when I bought it in a resale shop for $3 whole. It's about a divorced woman who has nowhere to be on Christmas, so she hesitantly goes to visit her ex-husband in, I think a tropical area, I don't know. She realizes that she's running through the airport to get to this place, that she hasn't bought any gifts or anything, so she's walking around looking for something, and she passes a toy store, and a giant stuffed animal pig catches her eye, and she stands there and she's like hypnotized by the stuffed animal and buys it knowing that it's way too expensive. Anyway, she carries this pig around and she notices that people's demeanors start to change. Like children notice her and they start laughing, they want to pet the pig, they ask to hold it. The flight attendant actually gave the pig its very own seat as displayed on the cover. The reactions from these people turn the woman's sadness into something totally different, and it's heartwarming and beautiful. There are also a few pictures scattered through the book that are so cute. So, the next and final book on my list, this is my absolute favorite book of all time. It is, however, not as cute. This book was written in 1915 by Somerset Maugham. It is called Of Human Bondage. It is not as kinky as it sounds, but it came to me at the perfect moment in my life. It's about a boy named Philip who was born with what was then called clubfoot. I'm sure that's derogatory in today's terms. Basically, it's a deformity. Philip is quickly orphaned as a child, and we follow him from early childhood through middle age as he comes to terms with his disability, his sexuality, his purpose of being, his future. He studies art in Paris, he studies medicine in London, he studies in Heidelberg. He does everything, honestly. It's essentially about a boy who learns the hard lessons about validation and who he's meant to be. I read it firstly during my first year of university when I was trying to figure out these things for myself. Although I'm certainly not handicapped or orphaned, I found myself identifying with the struggles of Philip. It's about coming to terms with being alive and purpose and youth. I cried, I laughed, I threw the book across the room. This 750-page behemoth is worth every sentence. Well, this has been my top 5 favorite books. While the depth and the content of these short stories, novels certainly vary dramatically, the reason behind picking these are of course because they are unbelievable and awesome, but also because they have special meaning to me and to my life and the lessons that I've had to learn. I could recommend these books to you until I'm blue in the face, but honestly, I talk about these because they carry personal meanings to me and my life. My hope is that maybe you can find some for yourself in these books, or maybe even if I've inspired you to go read your own thing. Real quick before I go, I will say if I had to expand this into 6, I would say The Count of Monte Cristo was a close 5th. It is such an insane book. Like, it's also big, I'm not gonna lie, and the language is difficult. They talk about a lot of like old-timey insurance stuff and ships and like taxes and a lot of French stuff I don't really understand. Between those moments, and there's a lot between those moments, I had like reading them, I gasped out loud. I had visceral reactions to what was going on in the story. It's a classic for a reason. It's basically the Princess Bride of French literature. And the author, Alexandre Dumas, also wrote Three Musketeers and The Nutcracker, of which I'm sure you are familiar with, I hope. But anyways, this has been so much fun, and I hope you enjoyed this, and if you like this kind of stuff, please let me know. Let me know if you've read these books. If you haven't read these books, I want to know what you think. I love hearing from you, and I will talk to you soon. Love you, bye!
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.